Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 5th Capacity Building Hub here in Dubai at COP28. My name is Roberta Ianna. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, and I'd like to welcome you to the second day of our Capacity Building Hub, which is today's theme, Effective Capacity Building. So it's Effective Capacity Building Day, and we will discuss effectiveness of capacity building efforts with a focus on strategies to creation, delivery, and impact measurements. There is a pressing need for enhanced evaluation and incorporating evidence-based effectiveness considerations throughout capacity building efforts. Capacity building efforts for climate action and ambition are the basis of what many donors and other stakeholders do to support developing countries, and many of these efforts are proven effective, yet there is not enough information on which approaches are worthy of replication and scale up and broader dissemination. Effective Capacity Building Day curates a sample of these initiatives as well as emerging good practices, knowledge, and innovative capacity building practices. And across the sessions today, we'll delve into new ideas and inspire actors to support each other, continue working together across sector and borders to collectively shift to a fairer, safer, and greener future. Central to success is the systematic monitoring of progress, effectiveness, and impact of capacity building efforts by adopting well-planned and suitable monitoring and evaluation practices and tools for long-term and sustained capacity building. The day also aims to convince stakeholders involved in capacity building efforts, fostering the exchange of insights and best practices. But before we start the day and enter in its focus theme, let me introduce you briefly the Paris Committee on Capacity Building. It was established in 2015 at COP21, and it's serving now the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And to support the PCCB mission and mandate, a PCCB network was established. It has more than 380 members now, including organizations, government, and practitioners, and is a voluntary association of interested stakeholders engaged in climate-related capacity building. And yesterday, at the opening day, we also explored the role of networks in collective capacity building. The PCCB regularly mobilizes the expertise of its network members at the regional level through PCCB regional thematic dialogues at the UNFCCC regional climate weeks, and through regular webinars and events throughout the year, but also at the international level throughout events here at the Capacity Building Hub. The Capacity Building Hub is a mandated event of the PCCB and takes place each year at COP, with this year being the 5th hub taking place. Its objective ultimately is to showcase the variety of capacity building efforts which have taken place over the year by sharing information, experiences, and technical capacities to further climate action on larger scale. And to learn more about the PCCB and its network, of course, you are all invited to look at the UNFCCC webpage dedicated to the PCCB, and I think there are QR codes in the banner here in the room. Now, overviewing today's agenda, organizers from the OECD, Youth Negotiators Academy, Bharat Rural Livelihoods Foundation, Iberdrola, The Long Game, Greenhouse Gas Management Institute, the dedicated grant mechanism for indigenous people and local communities, and the Food and Agriculture Organization will be together here with their wide range of knowledge and experience in implementing effective capacity building efforts for climate action. For our capacity building efforts to be truly effective, they must also be cross-cutting. And today's knowledge sharing ranges from education and building youth capacity through AI, gaming, and green career skills to fostering agency amongst rural and indigenous women farmers to increasing climate knowledge for non-technical audiences. Today's sessions are also reflective, covering ways to increase the effectiveness of measuring capacity building efforts and looking at lessons learned from participatory monitoring practices. And speaking of participatory monitoring practices, I will now hand the floor to Professor Greg Walker, our modalities experts of the Capacity Building Hub, who will shed light on the importance of active modalities for effective capacity building. So please, Greg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roberta. I will keep this short, which is rare for me, but I will keep this short. I want you to think for a moment about your university studies. What is the course you remember best? Think for a moment. Is it a class that you remember because the professor lectured day after day, class after class, hour after hour? Perhaps. Perhaps it was a brilliant lecturer. But was the class you remembered best one where someone asked you what you thought? Asked you to engage one another's ideas? Asked you to work together perhaps on a challenging task? I'm going to predict that the classes we remember the best are the ones where we are actively engaged, where the professor might give a lecture to set a tone or provide us with some foundational content, but then we go from there. I've been a college teacher for over 40 years. On one course evaluation in those 40 years, did the student write, "I wish you would lecture more"? Only once. Now, it doesn't mean lectures are unimportant. We hear lots of them at COPs. This is my 14th COP. We go to side events and there are wonderful presentations and we take notes, and then we regret that there's so little time for question and answer. But we take away some good ideas from some absolutely incredibly talented people. But here at the Capacity Building Hub, it's really important for us to provide opportunities for meaningful shared learning or peer learning, meaningful interaction. When I think about modalities, we know that term is used a lot throughout the discourse of the negotiations, of the discourse of UN climate meetings. And it does mean a lot of different things. To me, it fundamentally is about how do we engage ideas and how do we engage one another? And how do we make decisions? And when I work with communities, I give them what I call a modalities pathway. It consists of 4 Ds. The first D is discovery. We have to discover together what we need to work on, what the gaps and needs are, the language again of the negotiations, what the priorities are. Then we move to dialogue, where we really become shared learners, peer learners, and we come to really understand what one another's concerned about, as well as the ways in which our colleagues can contribute. But we move from dialogue to deliberation, where we really have to test ideas, evaluate options, set priorities. And that leads us to the 4th D, where we're going to make a decision. And of course, beyond that, we monitor and we evaluate. But that 4D pathway, I've laid that out to people and they say, I understand that well and it makes sense. So what are the modalities of discovery? What are the modalities of dialogue? What are the modalities of deliberation? What are the modalities of decision making? Those are issues that we want to consider, and in every one of those Ds, we are building capacity. We're building capacity to be better investigators, building capacity to be better shared peer learners, building capacity to be better priority setters, if you will, and idea testers, and improve our capabilities to make robust, enduring decisions. So here at the Capacity Building Hub, I've been honored to attend every one of these, going back to Katowice, and been honored to be able to participate as an observer in all of the PCCB meetings over the years. I have tremendous respect for the members of the PCCB and, of course, the wonderful staff as well. And I'm honored to be able to share some ideas about modalities. So I think it's up to us to say, let's learn from one another as we listen, but not let's stop at being talked at. Let's provide modalities where there's meaningful talking with. Thank you very much.
Just declaring the session officially open and thanking again the OECD organization for being the leading organization of the thematic day.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for these introductions. It's great, to set this day and the session in the context not just of the overall week, but I think of the long history of these capacity development days, which is obviously a key issue for climate action, but I think for development more broadly. Before we go into the panel, I'm very pleased to invite my director, Pilar Garrido, to make an opening intervention and tell us all about some of the key findings that came out of the report that was just launched on capacity for SIDS and particularly capacity development challenges also in accessing findings. So please, Pilar, can I invite you to speak?
Thank you very much, Jens, and good morning to all of you today. We are here to share with you, as my colleague Jens mentioned, a report and some of the findings. And if we are allowed, then perhaps we could do question and answers, not to fall into the lecture category. but just like the first thing, it is I have to say thank you, because it is quite an honor for us in OECD to be here on this opening on the 5th Capacity Building Hub at COP. And this shows that both our OECD and UNFCCC and Capacity Building Hub is actually strengthening over time, which is something that's quite inspiring. Sometimes capacity building is seen as technical, and of course is, but it is also political. We are speaking deep down about political consequences of capacity building, because without capacity, people cannot have the right climate-related response and also cannot match their ambition on climate with the right decision-making to be put into place. So it is also about being able to change, and this is for us the angle, the political angle of it. Today is about effectiveness, and this has been something that we have at the Development Assistance Committee of the OECD been thinking about for quite some time, since 2006 and 2012, but this has really revamped since since the 2000s, actually to mainstream all these capacity development efforts through development cooperation activities, and at the same time linking it with climate change. What we can see from capacity development and capacity-related development finance is that it is close to 40% of what our DAC members are doing, especially linked to adaptation efforts. The other very interesting element from the Development Cooperation Directorate that I am a part of and I lead is that capacity building since the 2020, we have been working on something like guidance for our members on how to strengthen the climate resilience in partner countries' effectiveness. And since then, we have been doing producing knowledge and fostering dialogue, and also exchanging dissemination good practices on climate-related capacity building for our members. And we have done this in a very close partnership with the PCCB network, which is quite important. So let me now walk you through our report. So the first thing, this is about capacity development in small island states. And the first thing from our report is that to recognize that small island developing states have quite complex journey in terms of resilience and sustainable development. Seeds are scattered across the Caribbean, and also the Pacific and Asia and the Indian. Represent some nations that are and territories. They more or less didn't create the problem, but they are at the front line of it. So seeds are actually grappling a lot with the urgency for capacity for development adaptation. So small island states are also known by the moniker by ocean states, and the proximity climate is true that it could both accelerate climate and economic resilience based on ecosystem-based approaches or climate change adaptation, or leveraging some noble sectors and ocean-based economies in order to spur economic diversification, which is also challenging for seeds. But it is true that it is also somewhere of a risk in terms of what it means when the level of the sea rises and others. So this Oceans Sustainable for All initiative that we work on seeds, like Fiji and Samoa, has made apparent that the necessity of capacity development for seeds in order to tap into all of these opportunities. So the coming years are absolutely crucial for seeds in terms of meeting their nationally determined contributions. But for this, then, it is absolutely relevant that we take and acknowledge that the role of capacity, individual, organizational, and systemic in those building for seeds climate-related capacity. And however this faces a lot of challenges, like unequal distribution of funds across and sectors impact the entire policy process. So the idea is also that this effectiveness development cooperation has to look at the policy process overall. So while currently capacity development approaches such as workshops from fly-in and fly-out consultants have a value, it is true that we have some questions about the impact or the results of those. The other issues that donors most consider or reconsider just focusing their attention on something that has been a proven strategy, as in to develop end-to-end accompaniment and peer learning exchange or mentoring that proved to be more effective than those before. In light of these considerations, let me just share with you several urgent priorities. So the first one is that the current complex and fragmented climate finance landscape puts seeds in a disadvantage, as we say. So to address those, what we have thought for our members is that they could embed climate finance experts and also set help desks or promote basket co-creation process into it. So multi-year approaches build domestic buy-in, and they also help address some of the systemic vulnerability that it is present in seeds. So partnerships that are grounded on capacity development locally, that are grounded on local knowledge, involving micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, academias, and communities are absolutely crucial. And these actors can also drive a lot of different motivations that can contribute to knowledge, to local knowledge and resilience more broadly. In conclusion, what we see is that thinking about that our responsibility and our DAC responsibility is quite clear, and so we need more financial support, but this is also about strategic, sustainable, and locally grounded development. And that we have to renew our efforts into fostering new partnerships and ensure that those actions are aligned with unique circumstances of each small island development stage, so that we recognize that there are the differences in those, and we just tailor strategies with the people, with the knowledge in the partner country. So we will continue to work with you.
The least responsible for it, you have mentioned that. And something else is really outstanding. I mean, the SIDS are really an important partner for Germany in the climate negotiations, because they lead by example, by implementing the Paris Agreement, by having defined very ambitious NDCs. And I think this really, we need to appreciate that. So you're really important partners for us. Of course, it's obvious that you have particular needs in preparing for the consequences of climate change, and you already deal with it today. I've already mentioned the small public services, and of course I agree, you know, to the challenges you have mentioned in this report. It is difficult to navigate through all the existing financing initiatives. It is difficult to understand, you know, which kind of support and assistance is available. And at the same time, it's high time for you to react. So that is a big challenge. What I also found very interesting in the report was the section on the statistics. Of course, SIDS do not receive a lot of official development aid as compared to their size and their needs. And also what I found really eye-opening was that when you look at the ODA to SIDS, it is actually those of higher income that receive more, and it is those not the most vulnerable who receive more. So I think that is really something we as bilateral donors and multilateral donors need to have a look at. And I think, you know, and I think the loss and damage fund, you have mentioned that one. I think this is a really important development in international climate negotiations, because, I mean, we were heavily involved in the negotiations over the past 12 months, and we took a particular eye on, you know, the fact that this fund is really meant to serve least developed countries and small island development states. So we fight it hard to do that. So I think it's a real success for this climate conference that right at the beginning of the conference we could take an agreement, or we could take a success in agreeing on this finance arrangement, and that, it will be especially dedicated to least developed countries and small island development states. In your report, there is a large variety of recommendations for capacity development, and you've just picked a number of them. I brought a few, project examples, how German cooperation tries to build capacities in small island development states, our approaches. I will keep that a little bit for me, and I will first listen to you what your challenges really are and what you bring and contribute to the discussion. And I also don't want to be too long in my first intervention, but let me just briefly address, some of the issues you have addressed. So you said climate finance experts are really important for SIDS. I think the NDC partnership is a great partnership that can contribute and help in this regard. You've also mentioned that data sources are something that is really important, and we as bilateral donors or also multilateral donors should really use national and local statistics. I can say that through our capacity development through GIZ, our implementing agency, we really try to use local data. And if they're not there, we are trying to help countries to build up these systems right. So let me conclude by saying, yes, there is a strong need for intensified coordination among donors, because a country with limited capacity cannot deal with each and every donor at the same time. And I think there is also a need for capacity development and support in the area to navigate through all the different initiatives that are there to tackle climate change, the mechanisms and how to approach them, how to access the funding that is available. I think that is also key. So thank you very much, and I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Birgit. It's very interesting to hear. I think maybe just to recapture a bit, you started out with I think just the example, the very practical example of the size, and we'd be interested to hear from Sulisa more about that. But what I just recall is that we at some point met with a minister of finance from a small Pacific SIDS, and basically I think the entire size of the ministry was 8 people, and I think the ministries of finance of some big advanced nations had a bigger staff than the entire population of the nation. So I think it puts things very much into perspective. Also interesting what you said about, the distribution, and I think on the one hand, sometimes the concentration of support, but still the question of fragmentation, which very much go back, to transaction cost issues and the challenge of effectiveness. So thanks a lot for this, and maybe with that we go over and we pass over as a very nice next perspective to Sulisa, and it would be great if you could tell us a bit, what you see really as the most pressing challenges on capacity building needs for climate action from the perspective of Sao Tome and Principe. So please, Sulisa, the mic should be working. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm pleasure is here. I speak Portuguese.
So then, Eva, if you could come and please provide some interpretation.
Sao Tome and Principe is very small country in Africa. Temos uma população de cerca de 200 mil habitantes. 200 mil habitantes.
It has about 300,000 people that live there.
E temos inúmeros desafios face à capacitação das instituições para enfrentar a ação climática.
And have several capacity building issues in terms of building the institutional capacities to combat climate change.
Desafios financeiros, na mobilização de recursos para implementar projetos de adaptação e de mitigação.
Financial challenges, especially in lack of resources to sort of put in projects that mitigate climate change and adapt to climate change.
Temos desafios técnicos, é preciso capacitar os quadros técnicos de como elaborar projetos, como buscar financiamentos climáticos.
And then, of course, there's technical challenges as well, and needing to build the capacities of those that work at the technical level to sort of lead these projects.
A língua inglesa acaba sendo também uma barreira, porque a maior parte das capacitações são feitas em inglês.
Language, of course, is the biggest challenge because most sort of capacity building takes place in English.
E limita um pouco que os quadros técnicos possam estar no mesmo nível da negociação no âmbito das conferências das partes.
And they mirror the technical frameworks that are set in place in sort of negotiations with parties.
Também temos limitações na capacitação tecnológica, de ter tecnologias de adaptação e de mitigação no âmbito das mudanças climáticas.
There's challenges when it comes to
Capacidade
capacities of
tecnológica.
technical capacities.
Onde é preciso nós termos como eu posso dizer, uma governança de dados, a melhoria da governança de dados. Nós temos em São Tomé as informações muito dispersas.
And in Sao Tome as well, the informations are very spread out, which of course poses a challenge.
É preciso trabalhar nas bases de dados sobre o clima, uniformizá-las, para que não haja duplicidade de ação.
And of course, there's a need of greater sort of coordination to avoid duplication of all these efforts.
Eu acredito que os desafios em termos de capacitação em São Tomé são quase similares em outros países, ilhas como nós.
The challenges that the capacity building sort of challenges the Sao Tome faces, a lot of other small island development states can relate to. So there's those shared challenges as well.
E a prioridade do país neste momento é a melhoria da governança, onde podemos construir instituições mais fortes, com técnicos mais capacitados e com os meios para poder realmente trabalhar e enfrentar os desafios climáticos.
And there's a need to improve, sort of build the capacities at the governance level and of institutions to really put these practices in place and these frameworks and build the capacities at the institutional level.
Temos alguns projetos a serem implementados atualmente. Um deles é o roteiro para a sustentabilidade carbônica, onde a Vera depois terá a oportunidade de partilhar um pouco a experiência.
There's different projects going on where essentially you can sort of share the experiences that Sao Tome is facing.
Que mostra que é possível, desenhando bem os projetos, servirem não só para implementar as medidas propostas no projeto, mas que também acabam por deixar técnicos mais capacitados e instituições mais capacitadas.
Highlighting again the need for institutional capacities and building capacities at the technical level as well to put these projects in practice essentially.
E para concluir, dizer que é preciso continuar a capacitarmos mais as nossas instituições. Defendo muito capacity building job. É preciso que realmente tenhamos especialistas dentro das nossas instituições a trabalhar com os quadros nacionais.
There's a need to have capacity builders within institutions and really build the capacities at the institutional level.
Capacity building job.
Indeed, yeah, capacity building sort of really on the work to put these different sort of projects forward and change these sort of frameworks and really looking at this, sustaining these capacities in the long term.
My colleague Vera maybe can
No, thanks so much. That's really interesting. I mean, just again to recapture some of the key points. I mean, I guess you talked about first the financial aspects. You know, I think the technology aspects, and also I think the complexity of the territory, and I think the population, and then fundamentally the point of, you know, institutional capacity and the ability to govern. And I think one thing that we maybe can come back to also then in the next round or in the next questions from you, would say, I've absolutely recognized these, but sometimes what I think is, you know, how much, and that would be interesting to hear, you know, in terms of the key challenges, how many of them are just the fundamental development challenges, and what are the sort of very climate-specific capacity challenges? But maybe we can come back to that. And now I'm very pleased that we also have Vera, the president of the African Foundation. So maybe Vera, I could also invite you to come in and tell us a bit about, you know, your perspectives on the capacity development challenge.
Thanks first. Thanks for the invitation to be here today. Africa Foundation is helping some seeds, especially St. May Príncipe, developing the national roadmap for carbon sustainability. This project has a large base on capacity building. So first, I will start saying that and I will take our work field, taking CAC as an example. In our experience, we identified 3 levels to work, capacity levels to work. The first one is the individual level, where we develop adequate skills, knowledge, competencies, and attitudes on 3 aspects. Aspect number 1 was identifying and engaging around 190 stakeholders all over the country. The second aspect, we had stood a team from the beginning to the end of the project, national technicians for each area of activity that we will work or that we are working on the project, like one to waste, other for energy, other for forest, agriculture, and so on. And finally, the third aspect is on-job capacity building. We did that with 70 students and interns that participate on collection of field data. That was a really amazing experience for us, but for them also. All of these are aspects for individual level. The second level is the organization level. We establish efficient structure, process, and procedures. For that, we identify weaknesses for collecting data that are essential to develop to development of national strategies. And then we propose improvements for that. And finally, for institutional and policy environment level. That includes adaptation of the regulatory framework to the long-term objectives of the national strategy. So we think, trying to answer both the experience, but also we think only works with a bottom-up and top-down simultaneously approach, because we can have, and of course is essentially, finance questions is a big issue, but without capacity building on these 3 different levels, we can't do nothing.
Thanks so much, Vera. So I think, good to hear, the three different levels that you mentioned, the individual, the organizational, and sort of the institutional and policy level, and the fact that they need to come together, which I think is always, I think that's part of the challenge always to, sometimes have these concepts which are really key, but then saying how do they come together in a practical way. And very, impressive to hear what you've done in terms of, the stakeholder engagement. Not least, I always find that, 190, I think, stakeholders, it's a lot. And I think it's also interesting to hear that even within a relatively small country, you have many stakeholders to engage. No, thanks so much for that. And maybe just as one aspect from the report, I think what's interesting is to say that the support to SITS on climate is to a vast majority almost capacity focused. And I think that speaks, on the one hand to the centrality of the capacity issue, but also on the importance of sort of, building that capacity to then, in a way, increase the absorptive capacity for other modalities and other approaches. So maybe before we go into a second round, since we had the great suggestion to open to questions, let's maybe see if there are one or two questions. We are a small group, so we can have a really interactive exchange. And yeah, if any of you have any questions or comments and would like to follow up, that's the moment now. Otherwise, we can also go to the second round. But anybody who would like to come in is welcome. Therese, yeah, thanks. So if you can briefly introduce yourself as well.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrea Camponogara. I'm from the UN Climate Change. I'm the global lead of the regional collaboration centers of the Secretariat. Two of the centers cover Caribbean and the Pacific. We are about to work plan for 2024, and we want to change our approach and give a major focus on the seeds and the seed needs for what would be our activity in 2024 and beyond. So it's very, I think this event is very welcome. It's helping shaping already my mind, and I will report to my colleague on how to maybe increase our current efforts with strategies. Fragmentation is an issue that we are discussing among partners. We are observing in the region a lot of activities which are not coordinated. So there is a high risk. Well, actually, it's not a risk. There is an ongoing duplication of efforts, and which needs to be addressed. And our keywords as a centers when we approach this issue is aggregation. So in opposition to fragmentation. So we're trying to create platform for all the parties in the region to coordinate their efforts, and we're having really good experience with the NDC partnership, for example. In the Caribbean island, for example, we are trying to identify priority areas that may match the needs of those islands. And we have identified at the moment like the need of a reformation of a policy framework when it comes to climate change, because it's still pretty old. And there is some pushback in all the invitation to look at what is the current policy framework and try to modernize it. The other one is resilience of renewable technology. So, and I think it's a really interesting element where mitigation and adaptation are linked together. And of course, then is major adaptation, risk, disaster, early warning. That's the priority. When it comes to policy, when it comes to reformation of policy framework, what is, and I'm asking to South America, for example, because we need to hear from the country, what are the biggest challenges you have in internal that, refrain from addressing the issue and make the process, reformation process so difficult? That's the question.
Oh, thanks so much. Great to hear that this discussion is already having an impact. But there's also, I think, interesting to hear what you said, the aspects about fragmentation, lack of coordination, duplication, and how to address it through platforms, which are, I think, very well-known issues. But there was a very direct question to Sao Tome and Principe around the policy frameworks. So please, would you like to come in and respond to that? And then, obviously, others are also invited to respond. Please.
Bom, tocou num bom ponto. Dos maiores desafios é que são tantos a nível de São Tomé e Príncipe, a questão do quadro legal, framework legal. Temos muitas leis obsoletas, ou seja, leis muito antigas.
There's many challenges, but the first one, especially looking at legal frameworks, will be that there's very old laws.
E não se adequam ao contexto atual.
And they're not adapted to the context nowadays.
Com o projeto roteiro, fizemos levantamento das leis, do quadro legal ambiental e identificou-se muitas lacunas. No âmbito do projeto roteiro para a sustentabilidade carbônica, foi feito um levantamento das leis ambientais em São Tomé e Príncipe e detectou-se muitos constrangimentos e lacunas na lei.
They looked at many laws on the environmental context, and there were a lot of gaps on sort of these legal frameworks.
Gaps in the framework legal. And for me, para mim é ponto crucial para as questões ambientais de mudanças climáticas, que é a questão legal. Por vezes, por falta da capacitação, não só dos técnicos, como das instituições, impossibilita a implementação das leis.
So climate finance is key on these legal frameworks, and especially capacity building, again, at the institutional and sort of individual level to bring these sort of laws into practice.
E falou um ponto da fragmentação, realmente, isso acontece. Muitos projetos em instituições diferentes e isso não ajuda. Falta de coordenação. Ainda estamos a trabalhar, mas ainda precisamos melhorar.
Fragmentation indeed is very, lively in the context, and a lot of practice happening in parallel. So the need, again, for this sort of enhanced coordination.
Many thanks for these answers, and I think the one point that stuck with me a bit was this point about, again, the translation of maybe the written policy frameworks into the practice and the implementation, where again you just hit these very real constraints of people and just the amount of capacity on the ground. But let me also invite Vera and Birgit, if you would like to come in on this before we go. Otherwise, we could move to the next point. But any additional observations are welcome. So I don't know. Vera, you seem to be keen. I'm not sure. And then Birgit, if you also would like to come. Okay, Vera, please. Any additional points?
Not exactly additional because, well, as Lisa already said everything. Our experience is exactly trying to fix and to solve these key issues that Sulisa just mentioned now, and try to put working together and give some capacity to these key levels to understand how to work together and which is the main conditions to do it for the future now, but also for the future, because this is something that is important.
Yes, please.
Maybe can I just add or react to what you've said earlier? I think the concept, I mean, that helps a lot, you know, to think about capacity development or building the individual level, the institutional level, and the policy level. But still, and you asked that before, is that valid overall for development cooperation, or is it particularly relevant for climate action? And I think it's relevant overall. For, you know, to build capacities on these three layers. And for me, what makes climate action particularly difficult and where probably more support is needed is the data collection, you know, to have the basis to develop the policies and actions. I think, and that is a lot of work and is very costly to do this and to find the data and to build it in a way that the country can do it itself in the future. And then, of course, you know, the technical expertise to analyze the consequences and then to define answers, right, on a strategic level, on a policy level. And that is, I think, very special for climate action. And I'm sure there is more particular themes, but for me, those two are very relevant. And I mean, for us, our cooperation very much works on a thematic level, and we focus very much on capacity building through GIZ. And I don't know if you know how GIZ works. They usually do not work with consultants, but with long-term experts in country. So I think that is, important too, and I think I've read it in the report that this long-term expertise is important, and so does the NDC partnership. The partnership seconds seconds facilitators and experts to countries, so that is a possibility, you know, to get additional staff to help you with the work for a longer time. I think that is a useful approach, and so does GIZ, as I said. It's a bit a pity that we don't have anyone from the banks or from a fund here, because we very much focus on technical assistance. But then, you know, once you have developed the policies and strategies and you know where you want to go, you need funding, you know, to implement it. And we don't do that in the SITs. So it would be interesting to hear the views from the GCF or from the World Bank, you know, how they help the SITs, because I mean the islands are small, and financing or investments in those countries and linking it to private sector and long-term strategies, I think there is a special challenge in it, because the islands are small and probably investment project, it's difficult to design and implement in those countries. But as I said, we unfortunately don't do that, and I don't have an answer to that. Thank you.
Many thanks, and I think that's certainly a key issue. And I guess in a way you can have double capacity issues, in the sense that once the GCF doesn't have a country presence, you know, a country like Sao Tome and Principe is very small, so just making the connection and having understanding that mutually, I think is a challenge. And then I think even when it comes to international partners, you know, I'm not sure. I think I recall that in Sao Tome and Principe there were very few international partners present on the ground, which obviously is also then an additional challenge in terms of, you know, even very well capacitated international finance institutions or international institutions not being there. That just makes it difficult, makes the connection, I guess, more difficult. But maybe let's go a bit further into the topics that you mentioned in the second round now, and you know, maybe let's zoom in a bit on the sort of good practices issues. And again, I would like to start with Sulisa, maybe to give us a sense of, you know, what kind of you know, climate and environmental governance models you think are successful in terms of really supporting you know, a stronger capacity base. If you have some examples of that, and then I would invite again Vera and Birgit to complement with experience from your activities, which you've already started, but let's see if we can dig a bit deeper more into the concrete. Please. please. So it's about the models in principle that you see that really work well for you in terms of building your capacities from international partners.
Os modelos que trabalham bem para construir as capacidades nas observações para os colaboradores internacionais.
Ok. For me, para mim, dos modelos, primeiramente, seria a melhoria da governança. Termos uma instituição que conseguisse coordenar não só as ações, mas também a mobilização de recursos financeiros que entram para o país e conseguisse alinhar todos os projetos, porque
A big one would be the coordination of institutions in terms of the money that's coming into the country and sort of coordinating all these finance flows.
This is improve the governance, climate governance. Porque o que acontece? Se temos as coisas dispersas, os projetos, as ações de capacitação, depois de 5, 10 anos, ao medir, não vemos resultado. Então, é preciso congregar para depois, a médio, longo prazo, poder realmente medir os impactos de tudo que se faz à volta da capacitação institucional, técnica e tecnológica.
If you have all these fragmentations of efforts and projects are not effective, so really the need for enhanced coordination to build capacities in the short, medium, and long term as well, again, at the levels mentioned at the individual, institutional, and policy level.
E eu quando digo melhoria da governança, é tudo, é questão de capacitar a todos os níveis, político, técnico, comunidades, em matéria de mudanças climáticas.
Capacities in governance is key, and especially building capacities at all levels of governance, from political level, technical level, community level as well.
E o passo fundamental é ter dados, informação.
And a crucial step in that process is having data and information.
Com esses dados e informação harmonizada, nos orienta o que fazer no âmbito das mudanças climáticas.
And that will guide what to do in the context of climate change.
Many thanks. Very interesting to hear, and I think again, a pattern keeps coming through that I think is conveying some very clear messages in terms of the governance. One, the importance of combining shorter-term interventions with a long-term focus, the institutional policy level. I think also, one thing that for me comes out, and in a way it also speaks to what Birgit said before, in terms of the data issues and the cost of that. It's fundamentally maybe not just so much a question of training the individual, but the basic resources that are required to sustain the capacity of the individuals, of the institutions, etc. So I think that's very strong message. I feel that is coming through. With that, let me invite again Vera, and maybe you can speak a bit more about some of your experience with the projects that you have on the ground, and what you've seen in Sao Tome and Principe, how that really has had an impact on capacity.
This project, for example, in particular, was financed for cooperation with Portugal. So I think the finance issue, it's something that we, if it is really need, and if the countries really understand the necessity, the finance issue is something that appears and it's solved in some way in the process. The question is if there are conditions in the country to implement the project. First, to know the objective, the main objective, it's a politician issue. The strategy, and then the individual level, of course, have the technicians in the middle. It's very important because they do the interconnection of the areas and the matters. So the energy knows what happens with the waste sector and the forest sector and the agriculture sector. So I think this interconnection is essential because they know what happens with the other area. And the individual level, without individual level capacity building, it's not possible have the projects implemented for a future gold design, because and must be on-job training and must be day by day in the institutions and with the institutions, because if that doesn't happen, and of course is capacity building, how to do the questions and which data they are looking for, but also the technology they need to use and how to use the technology. For example, to get water analysis or quality air analysis, and how many energy or diesel or so on, so on. All of that kind of indicators, they need to understand how to collect, for what they are collecting, and so on, so on. So that is our experience, and must be the government model.
Thanks so much, Vera. Now, Birgit, again, you've heard quite a bit. Maybe you can share again a few more examples that you started going into in terms of, you know, what you take away, and the experience of Germany and how to make sure the capacity support really has the best chance to translate into sustained capacities.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting discussion, and it shows, it shows the challenges, but it also shows some examples, how you can proceed. And I'm very pleased that the NDC partnership has just arrived. So I will talk a little bit about the NDCP and our contribution. No, but I mean, as I said, unfortunately, we are not working in Sao Tome. We work, or we contribute our support, or we channel our support through SITS, mainly through the partnership, the NDC partnership, and the different partners that are, that are part of this partnership, such as UNDP, such as GIZ. And I think the NDC partnership is really, it's really a useful vehicle, because it is 100% demand-driven. So, it really works with the countries, and it has a particular focus on LDCs and on SITS. And it really works together and looks, what is the demand, what do these countries need, and then a plan is developed that is the basis for support for donor countries. And we provide funding to, for example, UNDP and GIZ, to help the demands being financed, and these demands are mainly in the area of analysis, policies, strategic plans. So for example, the NDCs, I don't know the exact number, but there's a large number of NDCs that have been supported through the NDC partnership, and maybe Romeo can give a few more details on that. So the definition of national climate contributions and long-term strategies, I think that is an important area, but as I said before, once you have all these beautiful plans and strategies, you need someone to finance it. And that's why I think it's also really important that secondments of experts and long-term capacity development in the area of access to climate finance is very, is the key, the key then to implement it. And not sure if we have been so successful in that area already. And you can tell us, are you aware, of all the instruments that are there which you could access? Not sure, maybe there is some work still to be done. Yes, and maybe just a last example, but it's in the Pacific area, so we have, so to say, duplicated the NDC partnership or shifted it to the Pacific region and created a regional Pacific hub, to bring the support and the capacity development support closer to the islands, and have additional funding, to respond to their needs. So these are approaches we are supporting, but of course there is much more to be done. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Birgit. And you mentioned quite a bit the NDC partnership, who are co-sponsoring with us at this event, and we're very happy that Romeo Bertolini is now here. So maybe Romeo, you can pick up and talk a bit about what you do with a focus on the capacity angle.
Thank you very much. In Germany, I would say I used the train to come here because our trains are always at least an hour late. But I'm really sorry. I knew it would happen at least once during this COP. This whole time change thingy when you put the your calendar invite in Germany in it, and I just realized this was really not aligned when I was preparing for this event. I'm very, very sorry for being so late. On that point, I think we've been supporting about 60-70 countries in the NDC and 63 countries in the NDC enhancement last time in the last round, and we're just preparing for also the next round of the update of the NDCs. And Sao Tome and Principe was one of the first countries, and I remember this very well when the colleagues from back then it was Santana coming up to us and say, listen, we have an NDC now. They came to UNFCCC and we have an NDC now, what do we do with it? And then the CCC colleagues, with whom we of course very closely work, Alejandro is here day one basically, said, go to these guys, they are just setting up a place to go, what you do with your NDC, how to mobilize support and finance and so forth. And then I had the chance to have one of my first visits to Sao Tome and Principe at all, and it was also shaping our initiative. By now, we supported about 65 countries, as I said. We have been working with Sao Tome and Principe and many other SIDS on not only the support and leveraging the support and capacity building, but also making sure that the international community, which is often working through other embassies, UN offices somewhere close to the islands, but not necessarily on the island, are aligning and are meeting and are trying to coordinate. I mean, I remember also very well during that mission that we had two international donors supporting the Presidential Committee on Climate Change, and this was just in the making. And when we presented it with the donor community there, it was like, and with the partners, it was like, oh, you're doing this as well. Oh yes, we are doing this as well. One was working out of Gabon, and the other one was working out of Accra. So very interesting space, and that is also what the NDC partnership is doing. Apart from providing the support, we are basically trying to avoid duplication where there shouldn't be duplications and where there should be so much efficiency. I'm sure you had a lively and very good discussion. I don't want to drag you along so much, but just thanking you for your for the work and the cooperation we've been doing together, and also, of course, the OECD, with whom we are working a lot in the last years on many aspects, be it capacity building, be it measuring, and be it the Aid Effectiveness Summit there in Geneva. That was, I think, quite successful, although amidst in the Corona times and giving us quite a hard time to have it actually in presence. So thank you very much. And yeah, maybe is there a Q&A planned or something like that?
I think we have been flexible a bit with our shaping of the event, but yeah, the question of Q&As was one that came up, and we had a first round. You know, as you said, let's take advantage of the fact that, you know, we have an intimate setting. So let's see if there are any last questions. Any questions? It doesn't have to be last questions, but I think if there's anybody from the audience who has a question, also an observation, you're welcome to come in. And please, Miguel, if you briefly introduce yourself. Oh, there's Mike, I think.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Jens. My name is Miguel Galante. I'm the Environment and Climate Focal Point at Camões Institute, the Portuguese Development Cooperation Agency. And well, the first note is to welcome the report. We have a new development cooperation strategy, and the insights and the recommendations from the report are very welcome for the operationalization of our strategy. Then, in a different approach, I am also part of the task force that OECD DEC is developing with AOSIS in the perspective of building a new partnership to be presented at the SITS4 conference. And indeed, capacity building is one of the main aspects that our AOSIS partners have highlighted during our work and our discussions. And regarding capacity building, the focus are in data collection and also in the access to international finance. So most of the discussions we had today are very well framed within the main needs of SIDS to improve their action regarding climate change. And then some of the aspects that Suliza and Vera mentioned, indeed, there is a strong need for institutional capacity, but I can say in an integrated approach and in a manner that the capacity building is really impactful and stays on the ground after the project. And that's one of the main concerns in our projects, the day after, when the project ends. And usually we try to make sure that there are some progress after it. They are not fully dependent on that time frame of the project, and life goes on after it. So thank you for this very interesting discussion.
Many thanks, Miguel, and I guess that's the fundamental point of the sustainability of capacity development, where you say where's the exit and the capacity stays, and I think that's clearly the challenge, and if that nut can be cracked, I think you've made a big part of the solution. Let's maybe I would like to give a last opportunity to the panel. A, either to respond, or B, just in 30 seconds say if you have one wish of what could happen in terms of improved capacity support, capacity development for climate, and with particular focus on SIDS, what would it be? You can wrap into that any quick response, you know, to the last interventions. But maybe I would start with Vera and come this way. To just give a last quick idea of what you thought in this regard.
Well, not an answer or a question, but when we finish this particular project, I would like in the next years, see the people, the technicians, and the politicians in Saint-Tomé and Príncipe can make the whole process again and review the documents and the data and by themselves, perhaps with the financing of Portugal or maybe another country, but or institution, but perhaps, and I hope so, without us, because that means we do the good job. So we hope so, and that's it.
Many thanks, Vera, and please, Sulisa, final thoughts.
Falar em duas últimas palavras, que São Tomé e Príncipe precisa de uma estratégia. São Tomé e Príncipe precisa de uma estratégia de reforço de capacidade institucional.
São Tomé and Príncipe needs a strategy to enhance capacity buildings institutionally.
E precisa de fundos para implementar essa estratégia.
And it needs funds to implement such strategy.
Thank you very much. Very short, very clear. With that, Birgit.
Yeah, also short. I think I would like to continue the discussion and think about regional approaches. You know, I mean, if you think about data collection, not each and every country, especially those that are close by, need to do that for themselves, but maybe there are also regional answers to the challenges we have addressed this morning. And with the Pacific Regional Hub, we're trying to do that, and next year we're trying to hand it over to a regional organization, the approach and also the capacity development approach, and we're just, you know, in talks how to keep that sustainable. So after our funding ends, how, you know, the region itself can make sure that this hub will continue to exist. So regional approaches. Thank you.
Many thanks, Birgit. And so, Romeo, your
reflection. I think there's nothing so much to add. For me, being able to, you know, use the capacity to the full extent is to become, as for us as development partners, and sort of more or less redundant, and then transfer maybe some funding to make things happen due to the lack of cash, basically. But I wish that this is really in the hands of the people of the SIDS to move ahead and know exactly where to go and know where to channel the support from, and that's what we are there for anyway.
Many thanks for all the very rich inputs. As I said, we were, you know, a small group, but I think we had a very good discussions. I think lots of ideas, lots of points that came out. I'll not try to summarize all of that, but just to, you know, try to take a few essential takeaways, at least as they stayed with me. I mean, one was really, you know, what came out at the end here, to say the focus on, you know, having the progress where you see that capacity support translates into an increasing capacity base, so that you basically can exit or move to the next stage. I think the other point that we very clearly heard, you know, from Sulisa is really the fact that, yes, you know, you want to be able to develop a strategy, an approach to capacity development, but then you need the support in terms of doing that, and technical support, but also just the financial support to sustain that capacity, which is just, you know, a question of resources and the availability to put that there on top of the sort of, you know, the training and everything that you get. And I think another point that came out at the end from Birgit was the fact that, you know, there are, and I think that's the reality point that we mentioned at the very start of the session, there are there are real constraints in terms of the absolute capacity that exists, etc. And not especially with the size of different countries, not every country can can recreate and needs to recreate and redo everything when it comes to data and all these things. So the question of how pooling or bringing something to the regional level then can help being effective and address the capacity the capacity constraints that exist, but still offer a solution that is effective. Also, just to say that a lot of what we heard came back to many of the issues that will be picked up again, I think, over the course of the day in the last session, in terms of what makes development cooperation effective, questions of fragmentation, harmonization, coordination, all the transaction costs around that, and maybe also as a very last point, again to say, capacity is really, as we heard, it's about the nuts and bolts of development. And you need to put these nuts and bolts into place, then to build on them, and I guess, get to the next level where we came to the questions of, the maybe other instruments from international partners and the ability to absorb and use them. But with that, I would like to thank you. I would like to invite everybody to give the panel a hand of applause. And then we're moving to the next session. Thank you very much to all of you. It was great to have you with us. And I invite our colleagues to come over and take.
Thank you very much. So.